right, so my presentation is on the Camino De Santiago, which is a pilgrimage to the tomb of St. James, which is located in Santiago de Compostela, which is right here on the map. And as you can see, there are pilgrimage routes that come from all over Europe to Compostela. But the one that I am focusing on, and which is the most popular route, is called the French Way, and it runs from the French border across northern Spain. This pilgrimage has been around since the 9th century, when the tomb of St. James was discovered, something like that, under Alfonso II in Spain. And the tomb is really important because for the non-Christians in the room, St. James was one of Jesus' favorite, closest disciples. And he also is the patron saint of Spain and Portugal, and is said to have appeared on a white horse at the head of the Christian armies when they were slaying the Moors. So that's what he's famous for. So this pilgrimage has been around for a really long time, since the 9th century, but a strange thing happened a couple decades ago. In around the 1980s, the pilgrimage started becoming really popular, both with Catholics, with Christians, and also as sort of a secular tourist destination. So now the pilgrimage actually kind of looks like this. It's crowded, which is very, very sort of like a strange thought. Year-round, people are doing the pilgrimage, but in the summer it can get very crowded. And so it's this very strange space made up of very religious people doing a very religious pilgrimage, and also of tourists doing what one Australian woman described to me as a walking holiday. So weird. So I started getting into the pilgrimage in a junior year seminar on medieval Spain, when we were still talking about pilgrims that looked like this. And I actually wrote my term paper on female pilgrims on the Camino de Santiago in the Middle Ages, and sort of how they performed femininity in an appropriate way outside of the space of the home, which was very much where they were supposed to be at that time. And so I wrote a lot about how women actually sort of fulfilled gender roles, even though they were in this totally inverted space outside of the home, and also how that was liberatory in a way. And it was really fun to sort of explore this space outside of the home in the medieval context, where women were very physically restrained most of the time. So I kind of wanted to go and look at what the modern day equivalent of that paper was. Sort of who's doing the pilgrimage now, why are they doing it, sort of what is the role of gender, how does it play out in this space that is very different than an everyday space, and sort of with the added twist of all these religious pilgrims and all these secular pilgrims, what are they doing, how are they interacting? So I went to Burgos, which is a Spanish city about a third of the way down the French Way. This is said to be the most beautiful Gothic cathedral in Spain. I agree, I'm very fond of it. And the Camino de Santiago runs right here, so all of the pilgrims pass through Burgos and they pass through this plaza. And so what I did is I sat on a bench right here, and when people came through, I just bothered them and I just talked to them all the time. So I sat on this bench and I would like eat snacks and just like hang out and just talk to people about what they were doing and why they were doing it, and it was super fun. And so I sat down on the bench like my first day. I didn't really know what I was doing. I had all these interview questions, but I wasn't sure how it was going to work. And I started talking to this woman, and I was like, how's your Camino going? She's like, I'm quitting. I hate it. I don't want to be here anymore. And I was like, okay. So she starts telling me about how you get up very early on the pilgrimage. It's very painful, your feet hurt all the time, and sort of you're alone with your thoughts all day for most of the time, and it can actually be really, really hard to spend that much time alone and sort of thinking about yourself and reflecting on maybe what you don't actually like about yourself that much. And so that was that conversation was the first conversation that I had, and it sort of made me want to figure out more, because there are thousands of people doing this pilgrimage, and it's obviously like parts of it really suck, like your feet really hurt all the time, right? So why are people doing this? And then eventually the anthropologist in me took over. I'm an anthropology major, for those who don't know. And I realized that I had to do the pilgrimage if I was going to figure out why other people did it. I had to do it myself. So I rented a bike, yeah. And I decided to bike the pilgrimage, which is something that a lot of people do because I didn't have time to walk it. And as you can see in this picture, did not have proper footwear. So I went on the pilgrimage and I met lots of interesting people there too. I met someone on this mountain who was the opposite of the first person I met, who was this guy from Luxembourg who was like 50, and he had this accent that made him sound exactly like German Elmer Fudd. So he was like, he was really funny to talk to, and he was so happy about everything all the time. And he had this horrible divorce when he was 40, and he quit his job. He decided he had enough money, and he just had been going on really epic bike journeys since then because that's what he wanted to do. And so he was fun. And I met one French guy who was using the Camino as preparation for the apocalypse because he thought it would make him stronger. And he was telling me about how America was trying to sink Europe with its awful economic plans, and that when everything, just went up in flames, he would be fine. And so he was doing the Camino as sort of part of his apocalypse prep, and that's why he was there. And I met a group of university students from a Baptist university that had been sent there by their university, and they were very nice. And I was trying not to be rude, and I was like, you guys know this is a Catholic pilgrimage, right? Like, why is a Baptist university sending you here? Baptists are not so fond of saints or Catholics in general. And they were like, yes, well, we're using this as sort of like a prayerful time, a prayerful space, a spiritual journey that's actually completely disassociated from the Catholic nature of the pilgrimage. And so I got to these are just nice pictures from the pilgrimage. I got to the end of the pilgrimage, and I had met all of these really great people and had sort of a lot of conversations along some thematic lines. And I was also really mad because everybody tells you that this is a really profound, life-changing experience, and it was, and that made me really mad because I thought if I could sort of stay above that, then I could write something coherent about it. But it actually was sort of profound to just set off across Spain for no reason and be in this space where sort of normal social rules don't apply and meet all of these people. So when I got back to the States and had to actually write something down, I was very confused. I didn't know how to do this project in a way that would sort of stay loyal to the individual experiences that I had come across and also my own, and also something that would be intellectually interesting and engaging. I had sort of seen these themes that I could write about. One thing that was really interesting was watching people negotiate sort of like a new relationship to time and how they were spending time and what that kind of meant. And I could write a paper about that, but I didn't want to sort of use experiences of people as evidence for these big theoretical claims. I wanted to sort of let the experiences speak for themselves. So I started sort of having a crisis about what anthropology was and if I was going to do it, basically. Was I going to write an ethnography about these people that I had met, or was I not? And so that was sort of one problem. And the other problem, which has been plaguing anthropology since the beginning of time, is sort of the place of the observer, of the anthropologist, in the writing that you produce. And anthropology started out in a place where anthropologists were sort of presenting themselves as impartial observers, and they took themselves completely out of the writing, and that has since been sort of left behind. Postmodernism blew that out of the water, and anthropologists sort of started putting themselves back into the writing because obviously you yourself being there affects what's happening. So this question of reflexivity has been freaking out anthropologists for a really long time, and it was freaking me out too, because I had personally this very meaningful experience to me on the trail. So what I ended up sort of doing was writing a piece that was my own narrative, sort of my story of showing up in Burgos and then realizing that I had to go on the pilgrimage and then going on the pilgrimage and finishing it, sort of interwoven with stories of people that I had met in such a way that it illuminated the themes I was trying to convey, and then also reflections on 4 years of anthropology and where that had gotten me intellectually. So that's the project that I tried to do. I'm going to leave a few minutes for questions here, but before I do that, I just wanted to thank my glorious advisor, Dr. Klepper, and also Adriana Tasillo, who was with me in Spain when I showed up one day and said, I'm sorry, but I have to bike across Spain alone for a couple of weeks. And she reacted very calmly and just like fed me a healthy breakfast before I left. And I really appreciate that endlessly. And also my parents, who tried really hard not to freak out about any of this. Yeah, so that's that. And if anyone has any questions, I think I have 5 minutes. Molly.
I want to know if you, well, I'm assuming you had to like stop and sleep alone.
Yeah.
So like, where did you stay? And like, was that with other people doing the pilgrimage? And if so, like, how did that go?
Yeah, so the way it works is people who are walking tend to walk like 20 or 25 kilometers a day. And then there are towns along the route that have hostels in them. They're called albergues, but they're, you pay usually, like some of them are donation based, some of them are €5 a night, something like that. They're really cheap, and they're just rooms full of bunk beds and some bathrooms. And everyone, you get there and you claim a bed, and everyone sleeps in the same room or a couple of rooms. Someone's always snoring is what everyone will tell you. It's like, can get a little gross, but most of it is like pretty clean and nice. So everyone stays in those hostels more or less. And yeah, you all stay together. So that's one place you get to talk to people a lot. And you see people from night to night sometimes in the same hostels. Yeah.
You said you were biking, but most people were walking. Were there people who you traveled with for all the weeks? Were other bikers, or would you meet people and the next day meet new?
Yeah, so with walking and biking, you sort of run into people. Some people form a cohort very early where they'll stay with the same 10 people that they met in the first couple of days through the whole pilgrimage. I biked with a couple of Spanish cyclists for 3 or 4 days. And then I just lost them. I don't know. One day I never saw them again, because you just lose people and then you find them. And when I got to Santiago de Compostela, I actually stayed at the end of the pilgrimage for like another week and sort of watched people come in, which was really interesting, different perspective to see people doing the end instead of the beginning. And you would watch people finding each other over and over again that they had lost, a week back or something like that. That was really fun. So yeah. Sam.
Are you fluent in Spanish, and like how did the language affect like this pilgrimage?
Fluent is an exaggeration, but I'm proficient in Spanish. Yeah. So it also really helped when I rode with the Spanish cyclists for a couple days. They were super talkative, and I think they actually spoke more English than they said they did, but they wouldn't speak it to me. And so that actually helped get me up to speed. And they would start asking me questions about like 9/11 and conspiracy theories, and I would have to answer in Spanish, and it was, it was funny. But yeah, so I conducted interviews in English and Spanish, and most people speak either on the pilgrimage, speak one or the other okay. Some people don't, but the French are obviously famous for refusing to speak anyone else's language, so that was problematic sometimes. Jeff.
Was there any tension between the secular pilgrims and the Catholic pilgrims, kind of like the surfers versus shooters?
Yeah. Yes. There was a little bit. It was not something that you encountered day to day. Sometimes people who were not religious would say sort of derisive things about the religious. There were people with very strong opinions about those who believed in God. I think also people sort of tended to let their spiritual and religious selves out on this journey. So people who don't go to church every week were in this place where they were feeling very spiritual and were sort of like rolling with it. So yeah, there wasn't a lot of tension per se, but there was some interesting interaction. Zach, you get my last minute.
I was going to say, among the secular pilgrims you interviewed, how many of them were particularly knowledgeable about I guess you could say, the religious nature of the pilgrimage itself?
It depended a lot. There are some people who had been raised Catholic who knew exactly what was going on and were no longer religious, and there are some people, who are Baptists and very familiar with Christ and not with James particularly. So there was definitely a mix, and there are some people who were like, oh, my friend wanted to do this, and I thought it sounded cool. And then I, read someone's blog about it on the internet, and then now here I am, and they didn't really know anything. So it varied a lot, yeah. I think I'm out of time, so I'm going to get out of here. But thank you very much.